asked about the engines earlier. Each one of them is like 4,500 horsepower if we need it. It's got more power than what we need, really. We're more likely to damage the aircraft, the structure, than using up all the power. Yeah, the fuel tanks in the wings, there's 3 in each wing. So you got one for each engine, and there's an auxiliary tank, which you can use to balance the fuel as needed. We can fill them up. It carries about 45,000 pounds of fuel, so like 20 tons of fuel. And that would take us like from California to Hawaii, because that's a long way. So when they designed the C-130, that is what they had in mind. It had to be able to make it to Hawaii. Yeah, because there's nothing in between. There's nowhere to stop. So that's why it has that kind of range. When we're operating over here doing firefighting, we only put on about 6 hours worth of fuel, 4.5 to 6 hours of fuel, just depending on temperatures, etc. Like right now, we've got about 6 hours. And the nice thing is that this aircraft, we can take a full load of retardant. So behind you there, those tanks, that's what they contain retardant. There's 3 of them. There's a water tank at the back. And the retardant comes in those bags over there. It's a powder. It's basically, it has a coloring so that we can see it on the ground once we put retardant down. Also contains a lot of phosphates and fertilizers. So wherever you put retardant down, the plants are going to grow better. It basically slows down the rate of spread of the fire. It slows it down by like 50%. And even when the retardant's wet, it's very slimy and sticky, and you can see it. There's some that they washed off. You'll see it around here. Once it dries, it becomes almost like a parchment. I'll show you some. But retardant is still effective for about 30 days after it's been put on the ground. It'll still help to slow the spread of a fire. So it works pretty well. There's a big difference between what we're doing with retardant, the tactics to fighting a fire, because it's not effective for us to drop on the fire. It's not as effective. Whereas things like the helicopters and the smaller single-engine air tankers, they will drop on the flames. The single-engine air tankers can use retardant. They were using it yesterday, but most often they employ it with suppression, where they're actually trying to put the fire out. We're working ahead of the fire. And as a generalization, aircraft don't put out fires. We are there to support the guys on the ground, because it doesn't matter how much line we put around it, it still takes the guys on the ground to make sure the fire is out. Our parameters are roughly 200 feet above the ground is our height that we're dropping, so about 60 meters. And we'll be dropping at about 130 knots, so about 220 kilometers an hour, roughly. Now, the tank, as I said, it's got computer-controlled doors. So we can set a coverage level. Coverage level 1 is equivalent of 1 gallon of water. It's about 4 liters, spread over a 10-foot by 10-foot block. That's 100 square feet. We can dial up the coverage up to, let's say, level 8. 8 would be 8 gallons. That's a lot. Now you're talking about 40 kilograms worth of water spread out over that. It's a lot. This aircraft is unique. We can go all the way up to 12, which it's not often that we get to use it. Gary used it quite a bit last year, but if you have to get down into a deep ravine where we can't take the aircraft in there, you can rely on the weight of the retardant to take it down into the bottom to give you that coverage. So it does have an application, and the Coulson aircraft, I believe, are the only ones who can do that, just because of the design of the tank and the doors. So if you dial up a coverage, we never use a 1. It's very, very light. But when we do, like for testing, from the start of the runway, we'll start the drop, and it'll run about here. It's about 1 kilometer of line at a coverage level 1. Whereas we normally drop between a 4 and a 6, depending on the vegetation. The heavier the coverage, or the heavier the vegetation, the thicker, you want a heavier coverage level to get down between the trees. And the 200 feet and the speed has worked out that when the retardant comes out, it stops and it falls down. It's rain. You don't want it to be going forward. It's not effective. Because if Gary's a tree and that retardant's moving forward, it's going to hit him, it's going to cover him on this side. Over here, it'll be dry. Retardant won't get there. So there's a tendency, I think everyone falls into it, of wanting to drop too low. you think it's going to be more effective. It's not. It really has to come down vertically, yeah. And so I'll show you the tank inside. It's a very high tank, comes down to a V, and you've got these long doors. You can kind of see it underneath the belly over there, the part that's sticking down a little bit. So when the doors open, it's got a lot of head pressure when the tank is full, and it's pushing that retardant out. So it comes out very, very quickly. So the doors will open a certain amount. It's got flow rate sensors in there. And as the load is going down in the tank, it opens the doors wider to get the same coverage. So the C-130, they do cup testing, they call it, in California, Lancaster. And they will have us fly over at a certain height and speed, and they've got hundreds, thousands of cups on the ground. You do a drop, it's got to be within a certain low wind, preferably, and they literally measure how much is in each cup. And then they put that all into a computer program. It generates a diagram, the spread looks like, the coverage looks like. The C-130 is probably got one of the best ones, if not the best, for a tanker, in that it's very, very consistent. In the old days, older aircraft, DC-6s, even PBYs in the old days, they had doors. They'd open one by one. They didn't have a long door like this. So one door would open, then the next one, then the next one. So you almost had like blotches in your coverage. It wasn't a smooth, consistent coverage. And you want consistent because when the fire is burning up against it, if you've got a patch that's too thin, it's going to burn through there much quicker. So you really want that nice, even spread. It works better that way.
How much weight can this one carry?
We're carrying 15,100 liters, more or less. It's equivalent of 110,296 bananas, 6-inch bananas. Somebody asked us in, you'll be surprised, in Sydney, or Richmond, somebody asked us, so how many elephants worth of water do you take? I can't remember what we worked out. I think it's 2 elephants or 4 giraffes, 5 giraffes. So we had to look up bananas, just because. Yeah, just to avoid the metric system. Okay. When we leave over here, that aircraft over there has, we call that the bird dog. So there's a bird dog pilot who's normally reasonably experienced with fires, and he'll fly the aircraft. There's an air attack guy who's at this stage belongs to DFIS, Department of Fire and Emergency Services, and he'll be an experienced firefighter. He'll be in the right-hand seat. So they will get to a fire, and they'll talk to the guys on the ground, see what do they want, what kind of strategy they're using. The guys on the ground are controlling the fire. So even though the air attack might have a better view, and he's got some ideas and he's got some experience, at the end of the day, we are defaulting. Those are the guys on the ground. That's who we're supporting. We can try and give them advice. If they're not interested, we just do it. So often it doesn't make a lot of sense to us, but we try and give them what we can. So what they do is they fly over the fire, they'll find out what they want, and then they'll bring us in. And they can show us, give us an idea of where they want the retardant to go. They do have smoke that they can release from the aircraft. So they can give us a puff or even a line. We can see, okay, I'm going to start here and end there. And the smoke can help a little bit to give you an idea of which way it's going to drift. Because as the retardant comes out, the wind is affecting it. So it's going to want to drift it downward. So that also comes into play when you are deciding what coverage level and how you're going to approach it. Because where that retardant is going to drift to. The stronger the wind, the more coverage level, the higher coverage level you need. Otherwise, it's going to blow it all away and it won't be effective. If at all possible, we try to drop into the wind because that gives us a slower ground speed that's safer and more effective. We can drop downwind as well. It's not always ideal, but depending on the slope, we may not have another option. Now, in the United States, it's a bit of a different system where, like Gary's an initial attack pilot, so we can go out and we can analyze a fire and we can drop it. But we're not allowed to do that in West Australia. We can to a certain extent in New South Wales and Victoria. It just depends on what permissions they give us and the way that they want to fight the fire. So when you climb up inside here, be careful of these rails, they have grease on them. So if you're going to grab something, grab up here, or just grab these handles in the ladder as you step up. So as you've seen, as I've mentioned, this is a former military machine. It's a transport category. So this ramp over here, we can actually lower that. From when we stop here till when we're leaving again is roughly 16 minutes.
Right. Okay. Wow.
It's quick.
So it all depends on those pumps out there.
Yeah.
We have some bases that have very strong pumps, and that they'll fill us up in about 8 minutes.
Okay, wow.
But where the pumps aren't quite so strong, I mean, it's 15,000 liters. Over that, it's a lot.
Yeah.
So you can see the tank itself, how high it is, and it narrows down to that quite a narrow section. So you've got a lot of head pressure pushing that stuff down. If we dump it all in emergency, it opens the doors completely. It'll go out in less than 3 seconds.
Wow. You wouldn't want to be under that.
No, you don't. It will
Tear it
roll
up.
over cars, depending on the height you are, of course.
Wow.
I'm going to close this so it's not quite so noisy.
Okay.
You can see the remains of the retardant that's spread all over the tail, and you can see the patches where it's peeled off. And so besides the retardant, you can see the hoses that they plug into the side of the aircraft. I did not show you outside, but there's a port on either side, just in front of the door. And they'll plug the hoses into there. It's on the outside, and that's how it fills up the tank. We can also use gel. You'll see next to those pipes over there, there's green drums, like a 5-gallon drum, or 25 liters, I think it is. And inside that black crate behind you there's attachments, there's hoses, adapters. So if we go to a place where there isn't retardant, let's say Geraldton, there's a fire out there and they want us to go there. They've got water, but they don't have retardant. We can put an adapter in and we can use that gel and pump that into the tank. And that gives, gel's a little bit different from retardant. It can be used as a suppressant as well. Gel or foam, those are two different things. And then generally we're using retardant though. So the tank, it will fill up slowly on the ground. And then on the top, it looks like chimney sticking out top there. Those are one-way valves. Because as the retardant is coming out, somebody's got to replace that volume. Otherwise the tank will collapse.
Yeah.
So those one-way valves, they get pulled in and allow air from inside the fuselage to basically flow out with it. But they have those valves in it, so when the tank has got retardant in and you have any turbulence or something, it's not splashing out and making a mess inside the plane. When you're dropping at the higher coverage levels, like a 12, you will feel it in the cockpit. You can hear the pressure decreasing. And once we come back from a fire, when we're empty, we can pressurize.
Can you?
I've been up to 28,000 feet, but that's when you're a long way from the fire.
Yeah.
Water, especially when you get to bigger timber, you can dump a whole load of water on a let's say on some logs, and they're out. There's just steam. There's no flames.
Yep.
5 minutes later, they're burning again.
Yep.
You cover it with foam. Even if it does still smolder, it's not going to spread out from there. On our Forest Service contracts in the United States, we prohibited from dropping just water unless it's going to affect waterways or something like that, because we cannot drop retardant anywhere near a waterway. It will suffocate fish. It will cause problems. I mean, so we avoid that. But other than that, we never drop water. It's not effective. Should we go and have a look in front?
Why not?
We have two mechanics here, a crew chief and a mechanic, and they will, when we're flying on these fires here, no, they won't go with us. If we're going to reposition to, let's say, operate out of Geraldton for a week, we take them with. So these plastic crates over here, you see, those are, all of our aircraft have it's basically a spares package. It's all the crates on the bottom. So they're standardized. They're supposed to have certain small spares in there that we can repair things in the field, small things that break, obviously not major components. Behind Nathan here is a big toolbox full of tools. No, that's fine. Well, that's what I was going to say to you. Behind these panels here is a lot of wiring. I mean, this aircraft can power up like a city block. It's got an enormous amount of power. Each engine has got its own generator. The APU's got a generator.
A little bit busier than the inside of a Cessna.
Look, I know you guys can squeeze in because the end of the Vietnam War, one of these was evacuating people out of Saigon, I believe. They put 450 people on board.
Jeez.
Wow.
There were 19 people just in the cockpit alone. So as I was saying, you've got 2 pilots and a flight engineer. The flight engineer balances fuel. This whole panel over there is fuel. Got electrical panel, and then you've got pressurization, anti-icing. Those little screens is one on either side. On the left and the right, they look like an iPad mini. That's the tank controller. It's a touchscreen control, and we can select what coverage level we want. There is a facility where we can split the drop, where we can actually program 50%. So it will, if we've got 4,000 gallons in there, it'll drop 2,000 and then it'll close the doors. In practice, we never use that because we want the flexibility to keep dropping as long as we want to. The only thing that Coulson did when they got these aircraft was they put in there's a screen over there, an HSI, yeah. They put that in, they put 2 GPSs in, 2 new intercoms, well actually 3 intercoms, 4 including that one, and some radios for the Forest Service. But other than that, nothing's really been changed on them.
And the tiller on the side, is that for ground? Or
Yes, when you're on the ground, there's no airflow over the rudder. So you have to have a tiller in order to steer, especially when you're parking.
Yep.
And that once we get to about 60 knots, there's enough airflow. It's got a very big rudder.
Yes,
and then the rudder pedals will work, and then we don't need to steer anymore. Yes, some things are becoming more difficult to obtain because as technology has progressed, for instance, gyros.
Yeah.
This aircraft uses gyros, old style ones that actually spin. It's a mechanical gyro.
Yep.
Very few places will repair those anymore because all the modern aircraft, especially airliners, they use solid state or laser ring gyros, and it's all modern stuff which we don't have. And to retrofit it, to take this old gyro, throw it out and put a new one in, you have to go through a certification process, and nobody wants to pay for that. Especially if you can still find old ones.
Yep.
Once they've run out, that's a different story. We'll have to do something else. Now, Coulson we're the only operator of 737s in the world doing firefighting, and we've just bought a 737-700. Now, those normally carry 4,000 gallons, same as this. The 700 will be able to carry 5,000 gallons. The C-130 is a very good firefighting platform. It's because of the propellers, you've got airflow that goes over the wings. 41% of the wings is actually covered by the propellers. So you have immediate lift. When you open the throttles, you got this lift over the wings, which helps you, especially if you're slow. Whereas a jet engine doesn't have that. Also takes a while to spool up the engine because that disc is so big. It has a lot of inertia. So it is a very good platform for what it does. The air attack here he'll normally call us and say, hey, we might have a fire to go to. And then when there's an official launch, they send us a text message. It has the details. It has, like I've written all this stuff here. There's a frequency on there. And those are the other aircraft on the fire.
Right.
So,
are you going in layers? You at a lower level, someone above you?
We're the only large air tanker here. So there will be, like the B as bombers. Those will be a single engine air tankers, like basically a crop sprayer.
Yep.
So there might be 6 of those guys in a fire and a couple of helicopters as well. So the way the regulations work here, they have to separate by at least 5 miles away from us, which is not ideal. It would be better if you were operating both at the same time. And I think that just goes about the size of the fire, the experience levels of people involved, where you can say, okay, you guys stay on that side. You're not allowed to pass this point. And then it frees us to operate in another area. So if the fire is big, you can do that. On a small fire, that's not practical. Yeah, the thing is, Sky Crane and this are very different roles. Sky Crane is suppression.
Right.
So they're dropping on the fire, whereas we're a completely different role to what they are. Yeah, when you like the Chinook or the Sky Crane, you're taking 2,000, 2,500 gallons at a time. So let's say 8 to 10 tons of water every time. When we go into lake and you're doing things a lot quicker, I've done 164 drops in a day.
Wow.
So you can, especially if you're going to the same lake all the time, you can visibly during the day see the water level dropping. If you've got a water source that's close by, it's very, very effective. I've got photographs of us being on a fire, and that GPS in the front there. That's it has what we call TCAS, traffic collision avoidance system, and it's picking up the other aircraft, their transponders, and the closest or the largest scale is a 2-mile ring. And the picture I took, there were 5 aircraft within those 2 miles, and there were another 3 outside that I just missed by a couple of seconds.
Wow.
So, especially on a fire with bad visibility, you use that a lot. And then your radio procedures also telling people where you are, what you're doing, what your altitude is. So there's procedures at play. It's not a case of just go out there and
So
try and figure your way
that
out.
sort of thing does that give you sort of elevation as well? Or
it does to a certain extent, but I don't rely on it 100%, but I use that to give me an idea. Okay, there's an aircraft out there. Now I start looking with my eyes to see it. Funny enough, in like in California, both the police and a lot of their fire agencies, is they want you to be a fireman first. Then they'll train you how to fly it, which
Oh, really?
That's bizarre.
Okay.
It's a bit,
it's ludicrous.
yeah, you've got to learn the capability.
The amount of money they spend on training is just staggering.
Mm.
And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. You can take a person, train them. Okay, they've got a commercial license for 200 hours. Big deal. How much do you need to train them in order to be effective on a fire?
Yeah.
Like, I don't think we have anybody with less than 2,000 hours
Wow.
Yep.
in the company.
Yep. Yep.
And most people have got 6 times that much.
Mm.
Wow.
Now, to train a guy from scratch,
Mm.
just because he's a fireman, makes no sense. Easier to teach a person how to do firefighting than it is how to fly the aircraft.
Mm.
Mm.
Like for us, we can take a guy and we have a few of them that have firefighting experience on other tankers, like on P3s or the jets.
Yeah.
And we can train them in a C-130 because they know how to fly the aircraft on a fire.
Mm.
You can't take a fireman and stick him in here.
No.
So fly the plane.
It just doesn't work.
And when
and-
you fly over a fire, do you fly through the smoke level? Like, is it that high? Or the
Oh,
smoke-
yesterday it was up to 6,000 feet.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So we try and find gaps where we're not flying through it.
Yep.
And then even on the fire itself, we try everything not to fly through it because your
Mm.
visibility decreases.
Mm.
Now, you don't want to be 60 feet above the ground or 60 meters and you can't see anything in front of you.
Yeah.
So who's feeding
We've
you?
all been there and it's not very nice. But no, we try not to fly through smoke. There's a number of reasons for that. Firstly, visibility is a big thing. And then there's different colored smoke.
Oh.
Oh,
Like you'll have a grass fire is going to be this grayish white
oh, yeah.
light colored smoke. The smoke is black. There's a lot of carbon in that. That's coming from some heavy vegetation. It's going to be hot.
Oh.
If you fly through that, if you're low enough, the smoke's dense enough, your engines still breathe air. Now you're robbing them of air, there's a chance they can cut. It has happened to people before. I don't ever want to do that.
No.
So
No.
aside from the turbulence, because when you fly through a black smoke, there's going to be a lot of heat. So we avoid it as much as we can.
From the fire.
No, because we don't fly over that heat.
Okay.
We fly around it.
Around it. Yeah.
If you make a mistake and you do fly through it, yes, you're going to feel the turbulence. But while we can see it, we avoid that. And you try to plan that you will not go into that. But sometimes stuff happens. You can teach a monkey to fly an aircraft, but you've got to think, and especially this game, think ahead. Like where you're going and where you're going to go afterwards. And there's an old expression, you never want to be in a position where your brain wasn't 30 seconds ahead of you. Once the APU takes, I don't know, 20 seconds to start.
Yeah.
From when that's on, if we're like really in a hurry, we'll be starting the first 2 engines, or we'll start 1 engine. That takes about 40 seconds. The second engine will take 25 seconds. And then we taxi. And while we're taxiing, we'll start the remaining 2. So there's times when, like Fresno, where the base is right next to the runway, and we've already been loaded. So from when you jump in, we've been at the runway and we can't take off because the oil temperature hasn't even warmed up to 40 degrees. So yeah, if you really scrambled, 4 minutes?
How long does it take you to fly from the US to
4 days.
That is
Yeah.
to a bed.
Coulson's main mission is to provide a full suite of aerial firefighting tools, including lead planes or bird dogs, as they're called in Australia, to the air tankers, both fixed wing and rotary wing. Our job as aerial firefighters are to protect the lives and their property and the national forest and all the beauty that's here in this country. So